When it comes to EVE Online, every player wants to know the most effective tactic available. You want to know the meta. The meta controls everything. It determines what will and will not happen. Knowing the meta will alter your views, make you question your reality. It might even make you laugh. And now, you're part of it. You're watching The Meta Show.
Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to The Meta Show. Today is October the 7th, 2023. I'm Brisc Rubal, joined alongside Mark Resurrectus, and today, live from the hot tub, we have our boy, the man, the myth, the legend, one Asher the Smasher Elias. Good morning, sir. How are you?
Smasher.
Did you put my avatar in a hot tub, dude?
Oh, you're in a hot tub, dude. You're totally in a hot tub.
Oh my goodness.
That's so
Giving
good.
the people what they want. I mean, that's amazing. Wow.
That's that they ask for it. They get what they want on this show. We make it happen.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
So, ladies and gentlemen, I'll be honest. This has been a very quiet week in EVE Online. We have seen not a lot of fighting. There hasn't been much going on. There was one big ship loss we'll talk about because Mark wants to talk about it. But for the most part, it's been relatively quiet. We've had the start of Crimson Harvest. I think the most impactful thing we saw this week was the fact that there was 33 days apparently of the Crimson Harvest login campaign, but the event was only supposed to last for like 31. So that was kind of weird.
Well, we all logged in that first day, and
kind of happened.
They're like, hey, you have 33 days of events, or 33 days of rewards, and only 31 of them are unlockable. The last two were grayed out from the start. So that's maybe not ideal, I think.
So those of you asking, where is Brisc's suit? Well, guess what? Today is the first day of the American League Divisional Series, pitting the Texas Rangers against my Baltimore Orioles. Game is on live right now. We're down by 2 runs, but that's nothing for this team. We come back from a lot worse than that. So, of course, I'm going to root for my team. I'm wearing Orioles gear today. So no suit, just a white shirt with a baseball jersey on over top of it. But guess what? Hey, look, it's me.
Oh, you have a Brisc jersey.
Jesus, look at that.
I have a Brisc jersey.
Man.
So there you go.
Dude, is someone like jacked into the back of your neck like the Matrix? What was that?
No, that's my earpiece. So it's my earpiece.
Yeah.
Okay.
He's got a live
that's
wire.
So I don't have to have a big bulky headset on my head like some people on the show.
It's so Elon can get in there and augment his brain.
While we do
Yeah,
it.
that's how it happens, right?
That's how it works. So I said no fighting. Asher, am I wrong? Has there been fighting this week? I mean, we saw a couple of fleets I saw yesterday, but I didn't see a ton of fighting.
Yeah,
Has the war in the north been going the way it seems to be normally?
Yeah, it just is what it is. We're not seeing a ton of fights, fights happen when both sides, are aligned in what they want to do. And right now, the alignment isn't necessarily there. The people in the north want to defend their iHubs, and they're doing so successfully. And Pappy does not want to attack them, and they are not attacking them. So, what can I tell you?
So I would have thought that, given that last week was it was a totally long week of just a week of time off for the folks in Chinese time zone. It was a week of Chinese holidays, National Day, and then the Moon Festival. Like that, I would have thought that they would have done something because they would have had numbers of people that were potentially home in front of their computers, I guess. I know the Moon Festival is kind of like Thanksgiving, so maybe they were doing family stuff and everything. But even then, Thanksgiving time seems to be a pretty big time for EVE playing around here. I was surprised to see more of that.
Yeah, I'm not a qualified Chinese cultural commentator, but we were certainly expecting more than what we saw, which was essentially the same old. But that's been, to be fair, that's been the progress of this war for a year and a half now. It should be called the same old war, because there has been essentially nothing of note. No one has made a and by no one I mean no one on the Pappy side, has made a surprising attack. No one has wagered anything. It's all been very I'll give these guys credit. They stick to their script, right? They have a plan. The plan is to squat on someone's chest until they are tired of lifting them up, right? That's the plan, and they stick to it with incredible discipline. I'll give them that.
And that's I think that to me is one of the frustrating things, because everything I have seen about this war seems to indicate that this is just a content thing. Like, there doesn't seem to be any long-term goal here. I can't really noodle out what Fraternity wants, other than, hey, they don't like Volta, or hey, they don't like Brave, or hey, they don't want anybody next to them in up north. But it's like, I don't know. What are they doing? And so for a content war, you would think there would be more war. Like, there'd be more fighting. You'd see more of these fleets. People would be going out. And I know I mentioned that it was Chinese National Day on October 1st, and it was the Moon Festival. It's also Chuseok in Korea. All of the Asian guys are on vacation. You would think this would be a big time to have fun. But I don't feel like that there was a really big push. And we had heard from Fraternity and the folks that we're going to make a big push in August. They're going to really hit it hard. And that never really kind of landed. So this war up north, to me, has really kind of been a fizzle. It just has not been something that I think has captured a lot of imaginations. And if I were in Brave or B2 or any of those groups up north, I'd kind of be like, well, I guess this is just the new normal. We're always going to be here fighting because these guys are going to mess with us every once in a while, but it's not like an actual war. So if I were them, I'd kind of start, patting themselves on the back. They stood up. They've managed to.
Oh, I mean, I think you
stick around.
Spot on. You got to give them a ton of credit, because they're not, they're trying to be the fourth, Nullsec alliance right now. And when you look at size of characters, like active characters, they're so much smaller than the other three. So it is incredibly impressive what they're doing. And obviously, we're helping them, but we are the smaller of the two major powers. So when you look at the number situation, what's happening there in the fighting against the special military operation is pretty impressive, actually, right? That's pretty impressive.
I mean, if you just look at the numbers, and I'm pulling them up here so you guys can see, it's really kind of stark how much they've changed over the last couple of years. So obviously, the number one group in the game is Pandemic Horde. And it's not even close anymore. Like, it used to be this running joke that we would have that every time Horde would get higher than Goons, Goblins would do a purge so that the numbers would drop, so that they'd be number 2, so they could do this whole thing of, hey, we're number 2. And that's not really been the case in a long time. They are number 1 by almost 2,000 members. Now, obviously, members is not always people. It generally is just accounts. But still, that's a significant number of additional accounts that we don't have. Mark, you guys don't have any numbers like that.
No, I mean, not even close. I mean, the biggest groups in wormhole space are measured in the hundreds of characters, and that's not, you're never going to see that in a fleet, right? Unless you have some kind of weird Voltron that forms. So, looking at when you talk about numbers like this, there's always the question too of, well, what does that number actually mean, right? Like, and I can't speak. I'm not a Nullsec executor. I don't know how the dynamic of this plays differently, in your space compared to mine. But whenever you look at those numbers, the question is, well, what does that translate to when you ping, right? If you ping for something, or you're telling people, hey, we need you to be here on this date in order to do this, when you're trying to exert your will on another group of players, what does that number actually mean? Because there are plenty of groups in my space who have tons and tons of characters in the alliance, but how many of those are real, right? And how many of those are active tunes that you can log in on a day-to-day basis to make that happen? So I guess at a certain point, that's like a group's efficiency. Like, how efficient are you as a group? And just judging by what Zkill looks like, groups like Brave are and Blob to a certain extent are efficient groups in terms of how many actives they're able to field compared to how many characters they have in the alliance. So
I mean, if you're just looking at straight up numbers, so if you look at B2, you got Volta, 518. I scrolled up. Brave has fewer than 1,000 now, I think.
Volta
is fewer than 10,000. They have 7,000 or so.
I think Volta might actually be smaller than my alliance.
I mean, we're talking. I mean, if you just look straight up, Horde and Fraternity, that is 70,000 characters right there.
Yeah.
Okay. 70,000 characters. Now, if you account for spies and you account for, I would say potential, the idea that, maybe 1 out of every 10 of those is a real person, that's still 7,000 people in this alliance. That's a lot. In this coalition, I should say. That's a lot. And they're going up against a coalition that is 1/7 of the size, meaning maybe 1,000 real people.
Yeah.
And they're off time zone. So this whole war has been lopsided, and it doesn't really seem to really be an ongoing thing. So I wouldn't be surprised if, at some point, if I were Jinx and I were Starfleet Commander and those guys, I'd be ready to just, hey, it's been 1.5 years or more. We're still here. Yeah, but I don't know why they haven't started declaring victory yet.
What do you do though? You know what I mean? Like they can declare victory all they want, and to me, that feels a lot like hanging the banner for
on the aircraft carrier.
Yeah, I mean, at the end of the day, they're not defeated, right? Like, it was different in my mind, and I'm sure I'll get some criticism for this, but it's different in my mind when Test and the rest of that coalition began to exfil from Delve, right? When they began the retreat, that at that point is like, okay, you've done it, right? The deed is done. Because regardless of what they wanted to say at that point, like they hadn't completed their objective, and at that point they're phoning it in. They're like, all right, we're heading home. Like, that is a victory. But with this thing in the north, they're not going anywhere. They're just kind of deadlocked with each other. Is that a victory, or is that just like, I mean, I guess where do you want to move the goalpost at that point? You know what I mean? Like, I don't want to rag on my friends in B2 or anything, because I think that what those guys are doing is great. But I mean, all you've done is, you're still Sisyphus. You're not pushing the boulder up anymore. You're just holding it there at this point. Like, is that a victory? It doesn't feel like it.
Well, I mean, here's the thing. When you are staring down the precipice of your groups all folding and dying and losing all of your space and ending up having to live out of the suitcase somewhere else, like getting pushed into, some other system that, or even potentially getting pushed into something like, somewhere like Placid or something, where you're away, you're in NPC space, or you're in low sec, like Test ran off to do after they got destroyed. Saying, hey, look, we're still alive. We're still in our space. We still have all of our stuff. We haven't been forced out. That's a victory in my mind.
You need to look at the difference. You need to look at the difference between.
Well, go ahead.
Go ahead. You need to look at the difference between achieving and accomplishing something, right? They are trying to accomplish a goal, and in your real life, sometimes you have to just, like you said, chip away at that rock, and it is very boring, right? Sometimes you got to dig a ditch, right? And you accomplish that. So, and what it always seems to me is that they are trying to accomplish something. They're not trying to achieve anything. An achievement is something you remember. You call up your parents. You tell your loved one. You tell your buddies, right? We did this. We had this crazy thing happen.
Somebody writes a song about it.
Yeah, someone writes a song about it. And in Eve, that is something that happens. Achievements happen. There is a song about it. That is probably the most interesting thing about this game. They are trying to accomplish something. And if that is the only goal you have, if you want to accomplish without achieving, then they are the alliance for you.
Yeah.
Because that's just what is going on. They are being very methodical and very boring. And I have a feeling they will eventually get their wish, but I don't feel like that is something to write a song about, like you pointed out very well, Brisc.
do they okay, let me ask a second question then. From the perspective of the B2 coalition, is the state that they're in now, and maybe this is only a question that they can answer, the people who are in the alliance, the leadership of the alliance, the membership, the guys who are, you know, boots on the ground every day, is the position that they're in now tenable long term? Right? Like, is the position they're in now, because most of the groups in the game of their size or larger are in, I think we could say, relatively safe situations where there's not a ton of pressure being put on them all the time. Brave has shown that they are able to withstand the pressure that's put on them, but doesn't make the pressure go away. So I guess the question is, if they're able to, you know, are they able to, or are they interested in outlasting FRT for as long as they're able to fund this special operation in the north? You know what I mean?
Here's the thing, and I think
Yeah.
Babymaker NYC makes the solid point. Brave, and I love that name, by the way. Brave
Really good
has
name.
lost 0 systems in
Yeah.
a year and a half against the biggest group in the game. That's an accomplishment. I agree. Like, I mean, we made staying alive a thing during the last big war when we managed to hold on to our core 3 systems. They haven't lost anything, and it's like, if we can say staying alive, they can easily appropriate that and make that their theme song, because they've managed to stick around for this long. So I got to give them credit. And I don't know. Like, I feel like if this was anything more than content for the Bean Foreign Legion for BFL, which I think it just is for them, they don't particularly care, I think, about taking the space or doing anything with it. Maybe it's more personal for Neuraus and the fraternity guys, but even then, they're half-assing it. I mean, is that fair, Asher? I mean, I feel like they've been half-assing this entire war. They didn't come at it nearly like we did.
Well, but that's
Tony
what
Taylor
I was.
hit a home run. Go ahead.
That's what I was driving at earlier. Is that these guys are not, they operate differently than you or I want to, and I think my honest opinion is I think that a lot of their line members want to, but there is a lot of sunk cost involved in being in an organization, and there's a lot of dissonance, right? Cognitive dissonance, and like in realizing this, and I have been in these situations before too, so I can speak from experience where you don't want to say what you're kind of feeling deep inside, right? Like you don't want to admit it. And I think we've all been in there in one aspect of our life or another, right? But you know, in the end, this game we play is a game, right? And it is the most serious game you can play in some senses. There's nothing else like it.
Yeah.
But
But
spaceships is serious business. We know
it is serious business indeed. But you are playing for your fun and enjoyment. I mean, the thing that is so beautiful about this game and unique, and what I really am, the reason I'm really passionate about it is because I think that when guys strapped on leather helmets in Green Bay, Wisconsin in 1920, and you know we're playing for like the Acme Packers football team, did they realize they were starting something so that would be the biggest thing in America in 100 years? They had no idea,
no
right?
idea.
We are at the beginning of what is virtualizing experience, right? And it is so obvious that this is the leather helmet baby steps part of it, right? That it is very primitive, but it is the first steps, right? And that is what is really interesting about Eve, is I think that it is probably the very first thing, and it's going to be something people look back on, just like the Green Bay Packers from 1920, right? As these people were part of the start of something, and so we have a very interesting and unique mantle that we can carry, that we are part of something unique, interesting, and probably something that 100 years from now will be researched, will be looked into. People will go back and look through the scraps of old records, right, and try to find out this information, because I think that we are something unique. Now, that's a really, like, when you're shooting someone on the Tamagate, you're not thinking that, right? You're not you're not like, oh well, I'm a part of a unique experience that will be looked back in 100 years. You're just like, I want to kill this nerd. But when you focus it, when you zoom out, that is what makes Eve so much different and more attractive than almost any other thing you can do online today.
And we talked about this last week a little bit, and I want to use this as a good segue into the next thing I wanted to talk to you about in particular. We spent a lot of time last week talking about Zarzalac, and I thought I had made it clear when we talked about this on the show last week that my biggest issue with Zarzalac was not so much the concern about power projection, although I do think that that's an issue because of the way this gate and this system is structured. That my biggest issue was that I felt like this was CCP introducing their own narrative into the game for something that they're doing with faction warfare and those types of things that was going to have a direct impact on us in Nullsec. And here, we don't need your story writing. We'll write our own stories. We have people writing history books about the stuff that we do in Nullsec. You don't have that for Eve. For the rest of Eve, for like the storyline part of Eve. And I thought I made that clear, but apparently I didn't, because there were a number of people, including a number of people who apparently don't watch the show, but are desperate for my attention or desperate for the attention of those who are on the show. And I have to say, there are times when it's very, very difficult for me to walk because there are so many of these random schmucks on Reddit hanging off my nuts, I can barely get a foot moving. Like, these guys don't watch the show, but they know exactly how I feel about everything. And they can't put two and two together. Like, how could Brisc, he loves ansiblexes. How could he be against Zarzalac? When I spent 20 minutes talking about why I wasn't for it. I'm just
Brisc, can we get a little soapbox for you to step on for this segment? Is there
I got to find the damn soapbox thing, because I'd have to get
here. It was really funny watching people on Reddit accuse you of hypocrisy for taking the position that I took during the show, meaning that they knew that the position was vouched. They didn't know who said it, so they just assumed it was you, which is so good.
Atrum says, Warrior Fleet hanging off his nuts on Reddit last week. That is 100% true, and it was glorious to watch. Just saying. Now, as these guys all like, oh, Brisc, the Aspirational hypocrite. It's like, I explained this last episode, and I'll explain it again briefly, because most of you guys were here and you heard me say it live, so I don't need it. So for those of you who live in HiSec or who don't watch the show but actually watch the show.
For all you strawmen out there, I've got something to tell you.
Exactly. For those of you in Rio Linda, as the late departed Rush Limbaugh would say, if you are listening but you don't listen to the show, let me explain to you what I said last week. I said that the issue with ansiblexes that the small gang guys don't like is that they can't use them, and that the power projection guys like the snuffed out folks and everybody else hate is because it kills all the smaller alliances, because we can get anywhere in the game quicker using our Ansiblex networks, and they don't like that. They call it power projection. They think it's bad. I don't think that's a problem, because getting people to fights, getting people to content quicker in Eve is what will keep this game alive. It's not going to kill it. The problem that I have with Zarzalac is, unlike Ansiblexes, unlike filaments, unlike drifter wormholes, unlike regular wormholes, unlike Pochvin filaments, all of those have upsides and downsides. And there's no downside to Zarzalac. Now, last week I said there was no fee. There is a fee. It's based on the mass of the ship. But I will tell you this right now. If you are a Nullsec player and you have an Ansiblex network, you are never going to know that there's a toll, because you're never going to get the pop-up, because you've already got it set higher than any of these tolls are. I think the lowest, like taking a frigate into Zarzalac costs like 10,000 ISK. That's nothing. So I said no tolls. I got yelled at. Oh, Brisc, there are tolls. The tolls are meaningless. There's no fuel required. It's not like there's a group that owns Zarzalac that has to refuel the thing, that's using the toll money to do that, like Ansiblex networks. It's just straight up. You go in, you go out another side, and you're 1,000, 100 light years away. You can do whatever you want. That, I think, is too OP. Now, who is it OP for? Well, it's certainly not OP for the big groups. Asher, do you particularly care about Zarzalac? I would assume not, but I would love to hear it from you yourself.
Well, yeah, let me hop on your soapbox and attack the straw man that you have
Please, thank you.
Kindly crafted. First off, for your Ansiblex point, I'm reminded of Winston Churchill's quote about democracy it is the worst system except for all the others that have been tried before it.
There you go.
I think that antiplexes have a lot of problems, but I think we tried it in other ways and it was even worse without them. So I don't know the solution to that. Zarzalac, you know, people, your straw men often talk about the sandbox of Eve and say, you know, well, why don't you, you know, play in the sandbox? Well, CCP makes the sand, right? That's the thing. And so I don't think it's disingenuous to say, hey, we don't like this sand, or this sand was poorly conceived, right? And I think that's what you're getting at. And right now, this seems like an experiment to see what would happen if you hyper connected the galaxy, but you left out one side of it for some reason that I cannot fathom. If you connected 3 sides of the galaxy and left the 4th essentially unconnected, it's an experiment, right? I think they're going to watch the data. I think their plan is probably to close it eventually, but we've already seen groups trying to take advantage of it. It definitely favors some groups over others. I think that's somewhat unavoidable, but it certainly doesn't seem like when it was initially laid out, they aligned it, you know, with any kind of sense as, you know, as to the way Nullsec is laid out. That would be my main issue, is that some groups have a ton of access and some do not. Go ahead.
And I think to that point, I think the argument that folks would say on the other side is, well, you know, the Nullsec map isn't static. You can't program something like this that may be in the game for a long time based on where people live right now. And I mean, to a certain extent, I can understand that point. But here is the difference, okay? And this is what I get frustrated with, because I know CCP very well. I've worked with this company for 4+ years. I know how they operate. And one of the biggest problems that I have is Mark and me and the rest of the CSM can tell them something and say for months, hey guys, if you do this, we think this is going to happen. This is probably a bad idea. Maybe you should plan for this happening if you keep things going the way that it's going to go right now. Like, we don't even tell, I mean, honestly, at this point anymore, I don't even say, hey, you guys got to fix this before you launch it, because I know they're not going to do that. Yeah. They almost never will do that because they don't trust us. You know, you're players, you get it wrong as often as you get it right. So, you know, we can't trust anything. I mean, and that is a sentiment that I have seen in action a million times. And if you look at, I mean, just knowing what we know from past history, Goon CSM members told CCP flat out in 2018, 2017, you change the work wall, you make it this way, you do the farms and fields thing, we're going to exploit the hell out of it, and we're going to do it for as long as possible. And CCP said, okay, well, we're going to do this anyway. And they did it. And what did we do? We exploited the hell out of it.
Yeah. Have you
and how
seen
long
Brisc?
did it take for them to fix that? Years. It took them years to stop what we were doing in Delve, stop the Delve time unit, change the way work walls work, change the way supers work, change the way Titans work, change the costs, all that other kind of stuff. It took them years to roll back what they did. If they had just listened to us in the first place, then all of the things that people claim were bad things that had happened in that era may not have happened, or at least they would have been ready for them so they could have iterated quicker than years when the Rorqual thing came through. So what I'm saying now, what I worry about with Zarzalac more than anything, and this is based solely not on any inside information or conversations with CCP, but simply based on their past practice, that they're going to introduce this thing. It's going to be a thing. We're going to say, we will have told them, hey, this is a bad idea. You don't want to do this. You're going to cause a lot of problems down the road. And by the time you turn around and fix it, it's going to be too late. We can tell them, hey, get ready. Have something in your back pocket to fix this with. And they're not going to do that. And then we're going to be here in a year talking about how bad everything has been for all of the groups that used to live in the areas around all of these entrances. And they'll then maybe at that point, they'll fix it and iterate on it. And it's just like, you don't have to, sometimes you feel like Cassandra, sometimes you feel like Sisyphus, like you're pushing the same fucking rock up the hill, knowing that as soon as you get it to the top, it's going to fall back down. You got to go get it again. And I will, that's one of the reasons why I'm looking forward to being done with the CSM, because there's only so many times I can say, hey guys, I think we can see where this is going. Maybe you should have something ready for it. And then turn around and a year later, we're back talking about this stuff.
Have you seen the pining on Reddit from the neutrals that are basically saying, man, I missed the Rorqual era. I missed when there were supers
Isn't
and
that
titans
funny too? Isn't
out
it funny?
there. Like, once again, it's the worst thing except for all the things that have been tried before it, right? That's sort of where we were. It turns out it was better to have sort of a really fast growing economy where there were lots of prosperous targets to kill rather than, a stagflation choke fest where people are more happy to stay docked or be unsubbed. That I don't know why this is such a revelation to people, but when the people who were most complaining about it during the era are like, you know what, I actually kind of miss it, and I didn't know what I had at the time, right?
Right.
That
well,
that's
this is human nature. As much as it pains me to say it, like, I love this game, and I like a lot of the people that work at CCP. They're really good friends, known them for a long time. But there are so many situations where I'm just watching them pave paradise to put up a parking lot. They do this all the time. And it's like, you're breaking something that's working because you think you can get something that might be better. But in the end, it's just different. It's not really better. And I'll be honest, there are things when they went through scarcity, when they went through the industry changes in particular, I look back now and I'm just stunned at how much they screwed up what was for a lot of people like fundamental aspirational things. Let me give you an example. Just super carriers. This was a prime ratting ship. This was the best way to make ISK in Nullsec back in the 2018 to 2020 era or so. Like, when you got the money to get a super, that was the thing. Everybody wanted them. Everybody wanted a super. It was like, once you could get into capitals, the next thing you want is a super carrier. That was your thing. When they switched from motherships and they changed the fighter mechanics and everything like that, then that became a way of life for a lot of people. Supers were a big target. They were some of the most fun things to go chase whaling because you could kill them. And you had I thought the ecosystem was pretty good. They were relatively easy to make. They were relatively easy to kill. They were relatively easy to make your money back. And they weren't super overpowered, so like you didn't need a 1,000-man fleet to kill a super. But the reality, after with the Sino changes and the industry changes and everything, I remember, and I was talking to a buddy of mine.
Listen, I don't want to interrupt your Brisc Buster, but
go ahead.
It turns out aspirations are powerful and desirable, and people want to aspire to something, right?
Don't they keep people playing the game longer?
Yeah. It turns out that people would like to have goals that are achievable in their time frame and in the amount of time that they have to invest in something, right? And that don't require you to have 40 accounts in 5 years to reach, right? That's
exactly it. I mean, that was the thing. Like, they were aspirational, and it was achievable. It wasn't just aspirational, because the cake in Portal is aspirational, but we all know the cake is a lie. Okay, so if you set something up that's aspirational that's never achievable, well, then nobody's going to give a shit. Then it's not an aspiration anymore. Then it's just a random wet dream. Go ahead.
And more than just that, it's not just the fact that they are so much more expensive now than they ever have been, and and you're pricing out an entire generation of players who are just now getting to the point where they can actually fly them and would want to fly them, and now can't afford to. They also aren't worth undocking, right?
Right. Yes.
I mean, when was the last time there was a major super capital engagement between any two blocks that required normal guys to log in their supers for an objective, for a fight, not just for a dunk, not just for some just to shoot a structure and I'm talking about a fight.
Do you remember when the carb standards came out and then I don't remember this, but in 1981, I'm sure Brisc remembers this. The Corvette had 180 horsepower, right? Like you've got a Corvette that you always wanted, but it cost $1 million and it has 180 horsepower.
Yeah,
There you go.
Not the dream.
there's just no
Not
one
the
of the one of the things I thought was most telling after that big dread brawl that we had a couple of weeks ago was I was talking to Angry Mustache about it after the fact in the super secret CSM Discord because we were chatting about it, and his comment was, because I asked, the comment I made, because of course we were talking about Lancers and why there weren't any fucking Lancers on there. Of course, it's because of shit. And I said, well, why did nobody drop supers? And he goes, well, why would you drop a super? So why would you put a super in the middle of that? The super is not that much better, and for the money that a super is going to cost, you could have 5 faction dreads, and they'll accomplish more and be because they're so compartmentalized. It is harder to pull away, or rather, it is easier to soak up damage with a bunch of smaller ships than it is one big one, because you lose less depending on as things die, you lose less DPS in smaller chunks. Anyway, the long and short of it is, the point he was making was there's just no point to. There's no point to. Why would you? And so then you get to the point now where players are sitting here looking around at each other like, well, I guess I could invest in a super or a Titan if I want something to spin on an undock. But other than that, the most expensive thing I'm going to be undocking for fights are Phoenix Navies or Rev Navies. Like, what is that supposed to, I mean, I bet probably 60% of active PvP players in the game can fly one of those ships right now. And so you're saying that 60% of active players are in the end game. That's the end game of their content. That doesn't feel right.
I think the problem is that we're using, Rorqual era as sort of this shibboleth for prosperity. It doesn't need to be.
It didn't have to be that bad, right?
Or exactly. It didn't need to be that particular mechanic. It just needed to be that feeling, like that we are in rising waters and all ships are being raised, right? Rather than in some sort of tempest that is dragging people down and actively killing them or pushing them away. That's sort of the feeling that players get, and we've sort of normalized it at this point. We are used to living in the squalls, but it doesn't mean that we're like wistful old men looking back to better times. But the times are controllable. Like, the central bank can change the interest rates. Yeah. It is not that hard.
That's the thing. And that's why, like, I get frustrated because I wish that there were better opportunities in Nullsec to make the kind of money that we used to make. I wish that, and there are in other areas of the game, Mark, which is frustrating to me, that other areas are doing just fine and have powered through and kept all the stuff that they've got without major nerfs, and the rest of us have been sucking on nerfs like they're going to stop
hang
for like the last
hang on.
You're ruining the comedy of the show here, Brisc.
Hang on.
I'm just saying, I'm not saying nerf blue loot. I'm saying, hey, how about
we have for the longest time, and this is something that I have campaigned on as a candidate to the CSM and then a member of the CSM for the last couple of years. I have been campaigning on the issue of no healthy capital ecosystem in wormhole space, because one of the things that was introduced when Marauders got so big was people who weren't, we saw fewer and fewer dreads, and again, my boy Angry has backed all this up with data. We saw fewer and fewer dreads because why would you undock a dread? You've got Marauders that accomplish more or less the same thing on a smaller scale, and you can just mass Marauders and you don't have to worry about having to train into dreads or move dreads or have dread pilots available, right?
That is correct.
So that is in a very small scale, similar to the issue that is being faced with Nullsec, or that Nullsec is facing, right? Where why would you have a capital if you can't rat effectively, or not a capital? Why would you have a super if you can't rat effectively with a super? There's no point to undock them for fighting. There's no point to undock them for baiting. I mean, aside from the handful of people who are YOLOing like Hyper Rex for dank kills on YouTube, like that's cool. But is that what they are reduced to now? I mean, it's the same issue with the fucking Lancers, right?
And
it just got outclassed too. Angel Titan's just going to make that even not a thing.
Oh my God, Jesus.
The reality is, at least one of the things that I think desperately needs attention from CCP is the super capital meta. Super caps and Titans. What is the point of them? Because in my opinion, you cannot have a ship in EVE that does not have both PvE and some PvP potential. You got to have both. And maybe on a smaller scale, like when you're talking about like a frigate size or a destroyer size, you can have specialized ships that are designed for one thing, like one ship that's an ECM boat that you're only going to use in PvP or something like that. But when you get to the big stuff where there's a not just a huge money investment, but a huge time investment, that those ships need to be able to do more than one thing, because why would you buy it? I mean, literally, I have a Titan that I have used multiple times in the last 2 weeks. What have I used it for? Bridging. That's it. It hasn't seen combat in years. It hasn't seen anybody, it hasn't fired a shot in anger in years. It would be like building an Iowa-class battleship and then using it to move cargo. Like, it doesn't make any sense. It's just, you're not, and when you look at and I want to get back, because it's something I was trying to get to before, and I think we were talking about it. Like, my buddy built his first hell, cost him 12 billion ISK. He ratted and mined, made the money, and mined all the materials himself, built the thing himself. 12 billion ISK in 2019, okay? That was a hell. He fitted it out for another 10 bill with all the fighters and everything else he needed. So that for that super, for him, 22 billion ISK. I just fitted out another super to just this was really just I want to see how much it costs thing for myself. I fitted out a Wyvern, 53 billion ISK just for the hull. And the dude that sold it to me, I'm pretty sure, took a loss on that, because I think it is about 55 billion in materials cost at current GETA value. That is 4 times as much as it was 3 years ago. And then fitting it out, I think overall by the end, I had spent something like 69 billion ISK to fit out this Wyvern, whereas it cost a fourth of that just a couple years ago. And for a lot of people, that is not an aspirational attainable level of ISK, especially if these guys are also trying to plex their accounts every month. So then you have this giant nut and you're chasing this dream that's never going to happen. And even if you do catch it, then you're like the dog that caught the bus. Now what?
Yeah.
You know, what are you going to do with it? You're not going to do it. It's going to sit in your hangar. It's a hangar
candy. A lot of giant nut conversation from Brisc today.
Oh, yeah. He's thinking about it. It's on the mind.
Yeah. I can't help it.
Well, you know, as you get older, sometimes there's some inflammation.
I'm just saying.
My concern is that it feels like they have not prioritized this correctly, because, and listen, I'm not a game designer. I'm not a developer. I write sometimes, and I talk on internet radio shows. Like, this is the extent of my experience in this field. So take us with a grain of salt. But as cool as I'm sure that they think Zarzalac is going to be to bring this all back around, why are we spending time working on this thing that, I mean, not to say that I think that the Uprising expansion should have been the end all of faction warfare, but this is now the second year in a row where our primary expansion is going to be a faction warfare expansion, and there's still no answer to Apex Nullsec PvE, right? Or a reason why people would undock for Apex Nullsec fights. There's no reason for it, right? So I get it. It's cool, sure, whatever. I have made my opinions very well known. It feels like a waste of time that as neat as this is, you have a lot of development time going into something that is, I have to assume, clearly somebody's pet project, because there's so many other pressing issues that could really use that time right now that are not getting that time, right. And that's aggravating.
Brisc, can I borrow your soapbox for a second?
Please, it's all yours, After.
I'd like to step on it for a second and say, I'm going to give some hard truths to the entire player base and the developers that you may not want to hear, but that are true. And that is that Nullsec drives this game. It is a Nullsec up game.
Sorry,
every time a fight happens in faction warfare, the BBC News has never said, hey, there was a really awesome 20v20 fight in a Plex in a faction warfare site. There's never been PC Gamer, saying, hey, tell us about the awesome 1v1 you had, because the game loop of this game is not good. It's just not good. There are way better games out there. The Experience is what is good, and you can only write about experience that is massive or interesting or unique or dynamic, and that is all from Nullsec. So I think it's awesome that they have focused on faction warfare because it needed changes, right? It needed changes. I think that the Nullsec, wormhole space, Lowsec, those all need to be addressed, right? But for this game to thrive, it is Nullsec out, not any other way. And that is what they need to remember. And I feel like they have forgotten this. I feel like they see, hey, new players start in high sec. That's true. You put them there, right? Like that's that is the default. But it is not what makes this game thrive. And I'm not like against low sec players. I'm not against high sec players or wormholers. I'm happy that they're having fun. But I want them to live in a game that is here 30 years from now, 40 years from now. And the way that's going to happen is to embrace the stories that players create, because those are by their very nature compelling. No one is going, when I talked about how people are going to look back at this game, they're not going to look back and remember what is it, Empress Jamal Serum or whatever, the storyline for Empress Jamal Serum. That will not be remembered. But there is a Wikipedia entry on the Battle of Bitakar, right? Yeah. These things are what drive humans, is interaction with other people, genuine interaction, and novel interaction. And that is only going to come out of Nullsec.
And I agree with you. And to respond to some of the folks in the chat, because invariably when we bring this up, somebody will say something along the lines of, Brisc, Asher, oh, you guys, you freaking nullsecers, you think the game revolves around you and nobody else has ever done anything. Faction warfare didn't get any attention for 10 years and Nullsec is already complaining because they've gotten a year worth of time. Here is the deal, okay? It's not that faction warfare got no attention for 10 years and now they're getting attention, so we're jealous. I am happy that faction warfare is getting attention. They desperately deserved it. And I spent 2 years on the CSM advocating, saying, hey, you guys need to do something to help the faction warfare guys. Okay. The problem is twofold. One, the entire time they were doing all of that stuff and not paying attention to faction warfare, what were they doing? They were nerfing Nullsec. Like it was a steady diet of nerfs, like over and over again. Now, yes, they added some things and they made some ship balance changes and shit like that. But at the end of the day, these guys did not focus on Null in a way that we would like, which is not about content or anything. It's about making the game fun, giving us the tools so we can tell our stories. You guys can make stories all you want for the folks in high sec and the folks in low sec and the folks in wherever else, Pochven or whatever you want to call it, because those guys had a lot of fun with all that stuff. But for us, it was a steady diet of nerfs. Well, they changed our anomaly spawn rate. They changed how the way moons work. They changed all of industry. They changed how much we can, ISK we can make. They added a whole bunch of stuff from other areas of the game so we couldn't build the way we used to build in Nullsec. They changed Sinos. They changed, they do the nerf to EHP and all. They made ridiculous numbers of changes. Now, not all of them only solely affected Nullsec, but a lot of them did. And the result was we ate a steady diet of nerfs that entire time. That's one. The second issue is when they do this stuff like Zarzalac, where we are collateral damage, to use to use Rise's wormhole phrase, to whatever they're trying to do, and they're ignoring the impact that this stuff has on our game and our meta. And it's not hard. Like it's what Asher said. When you're looking at the groups and the people and the areas that drive the long-term health of this game, maybe, just maybe, when you're making changes or you're adding something, you can't just keep shitting on everybody and assume that they're going to stick around.
Yeah,
now,
and
yes,
that's
many people of us do, but
it should be looked at from a health perspective. It's not. I really dislike this like internecine fighting where like wormholers are like, oh, I hate nullsecers and like all this stuff. That's stupid, and it's just human tribalism, and especially dumb in a game like this, other than just doing it for fun, right? But like as far as the health of the game, having a healthy nullsec is a healthy body for the rest of the game, because
bingo.
What happens when people get tired of nullsec, and they do, is they go into the wormhole. So like, wow, I'm having way more fun here. You've heard people say that because they do it
all the time.
Turns out it's the right place for them, or faction warfare, or whatever it is. That's that's good for everyone. We're talking again about rising waters and raising all ships. I want wormholers to be having more fun and more people and more fights and faction warfare, low sec. But that starts from nullsec, and that's why it's important that CCP focus on it, and not neglect other parts of the game, but also they need to focus on this one too.
I have told the story a couple times, but the reason I left HiSec in the first place was to join Test back in 2016,
and we still hold that against you, by the way.
I know you do. I know you do. But it was moving there that made me realize there are other interesting parts of the game, which inevitably then led to where I'm at now. So I've made the argument several times that a healthy nullsec is a key to a healthy game, and if one can't come before the other, right? That has been true. That remains true. A lot of people probably don't want to hear it, but I mean that's just the way it goes. We can't. There are so many other niche activities in this game where people end up at because they went to. They went to a block first and then ended up somewhere else. And I maybe I'll get crucified for saying that, but I mean I've said that for years, so I don't know what the problem would be. There was one more. I think you said something about made some comment about how tribalism is wormholers hating nullsecers. I do want to be very specific. I don't think it's wormholers hate nullsecers. They mostly just hate Brisc.
That is absolutely true.
So
that is 100% true.
I think we're good on that front. So
there you go.
Yeah, where are my Moabites at? When we're going to talk about this Chemosh?
Yeah. So there was actually something big that did happen in wormholes, and Mark wanted to talk about it. So you don't see these very often, but when you see them, it's kind of nice.
No, I want to talk.
Chemosh down.
Yeah, since we're talking about giant nuts, let's talk about this guy for a second. So. This guy, Revelation Pilot, that's not his main's name, but I don't want to out him in case it's supposed to be a secret. This is a blinged ass Chemosh, and those abyssals were thick. So the story here is that these two groups connected. These are both groups who I'm friends with. I like both of these guys. And they ran into each other. There was some scrapping. Almost Dangerous was in one wormhole. Singularity Syndicate was in the other. They were fighting in Almost Dangerous's home. The fight began to turn against Almost Dangerous. So they warped a Lif over or an Apostle. One of the two, I think it was an Apostle. Warped an Apostle over to try and get their fleet out. At that point, Singularity Syndicate YOLOs a Chemosh into their home and rolls the hole behind them, which is perhaps not advisable because at that point there really isn't much they can do to reinforce it. And you did just put a faction dread into somebody's home. Now, I understand that the reason for this was because they thought that the other guys were beat effectively. They thought that they were, they had already lost so much at that point that there wouldn't really be that much of a response. But shocking, I know, people turn up for faction dreads. So they did undock, I think, 6 other dreads at that point, including, Azernitra, bless up, and swamped it, absolutely swamped it. So this is the second Chemosh kill, I think, in wormhole space.
Loot Fairy said mostly. I mean, there were. I mean, at least unfortunately the.
Nukem
didn't drop, but everything else.
I need to allow this comment because Nukem makes a good point. Whole mass means nothing to a man with testicles as large as his. Yeah, man. If you're willing to YOLO a fucking faction dread, suicide it through a hole to defend your homies, like that's some pretty big schnuts on that guy. So shout out to him for making that happen. And if anybody else has any dark blood capital capacitor boosters laying around, I do need another one for my Zern. So
I think I have a blueprint for that. So
if you've got, I might have to take that off your hands because they're hard to get a hold of, man. Those things, they were like 12 build for a while. I think the others that I have,
Ezekiel has it priced at 15. That seems really high.
It is really high, but we'll see. Anyway, so
you want to know a nifty trick? You can load like 400s in there, cap booster 400s, and get 53. You can get 53 400s in one of those.
It is the reason they use 3200s is because they're at a certain, like, it's for inject repping. The idea is that the 3200 gives you enough that you can run both of your reps in a single cycle. So if you're capped out, you inject and then hit your reps at the same time. You have just enough cap that you can run both the reps in a single cycle, and you can effectively do that as long as you can time the two up correctly. So you can't do it with 400s. So it's neat. It's a cool thing to have. And that Kamash, as far as I know, that Kamash is already replaced, which is also kind of cool. So
blue loot,
not surprising though, given how much money you fuckers
I'm pretty sure that guy
say.
was actually a goon before he moved to wormhole space. So, a little suspicious.
So he's one of those. Okay.
No, it's the same as anything else. The game is better when people are willing to do cool things. So if you feel like you're bored, like, go out and do some cool shit. See what happens.
And that's the thing. I will tell you this: we are never going to make fun of anybody unless they're in Horde for losing something stupidly. If you have the balls to lose something stupidly, we're usually going to praise you.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
And this is one of the situations where, you know what, that was legit.
Yeah, I was just talking the other day.
I'm impressed.
When we kill a ratting dread in Horde space, it's a huge blow to their morale, of their economy. And when they kill one in ours, it's already replaced. That guy was an idiot.
Mm-hmm.
So
I just,
exactly.
At a certain point, you just got to be willing to, this is like the 6th time we've made a nuts reference on the show today. But sometimes you just got to let those bad boys swang. You know what I mean? You just got to let them out there,
pistachios.
Get some air.
Exactly.
You know what I mean? So there you go. That's all I got.
That's all you got? Well, I mean, that was pretty good. I kind of dig that. It was
not
fun.
bad.
So
Orioles are still down.
Yeah, we're still down by a run. It's all right. It's bottom of the 8th. We're
you still got time.
We're up. It's all right. We got plenty of time. And
Texas A&M's up on Bama.
Go watch.
Are they really?
Poor Texas, right?
Man, if Texas loses and A&M wins,
it's gonna be a bad day in Texas for all those UT fans.
Yeah.
They're gonna hear it. Poor hook 'em horns. All right, ladies and gentlemen, this has been the Meta Show for October the 7th, 2023. I'm Brisc Rubal alongside Mark Resurrectus. Joining us live from the hot tub was Asher Elias.
I am so pruny right now.
I know, you got to be pruny. I've been here the whole time. We want to thank you guys for watching. We will see you next week for the Meta Show. And as always, you stay classy.